Welcome to the pathway of the mystic, the path of heart and non-duality, devoted to the realization of the presence of God. Join me, your host, Ben, on this journey of heart and mind. Hello, y'all. Just checking in here from Minnesota. A little cold outside, of course. It's the morning. Still got the coffee going. Put little styrofoam cups in the freezer full of water, and now I use them to rub my sprained ankle. I'm about 4 or 5 days in on a sprained ankle, I think 5 now. And ice directly on it seems to be working, elevating and ice. So I think I can do away with the crutches today. I'm going to try. Something that came to mind today that I wanted to talk about was a great sage that lived in India and died only 10 years ago, I believe. It might have been 2009 that he died. He lived to be in his late 90s, a rightful old age. He sat with Nisargadatta Maharaj. He translated for Nisargadatta. A lot of you probably know who he is, Ramesh Balsekar. So I actually went and saw Ramesh in India, in Mumbai. I think his father owned the apartment flat that he lived in, but his father was dead and Ramesh owned it. Ramesh, oh, there goes my ice. Ramesh was the former president of the Bank of India. Very intelligent guy, very intelligent. And he had his own guru, just a kind of like a typical family guru in India. The guru wasn't enlightened, but he did, press people onward towards good works and good being, and of course the Vedas and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, definitely a good role model and traditional guru type, but not a Nisargadatta Maharaj, let's say, or Ramana Maharshi. However, Ramesh, as per my understanding, I did sit with him in Mumbai and learned some things about him. He had his palm leaf read. So there's this thing in India where they'll read a palm leaf, and in order to see if it's your leaf, they tell you all the names of your siblings and perhaps your parents too, but they tell you your family member names. And so these are people that have no idea who you are. You might have traveled along, many states, and they have no idea who you are. There's a lot of people, almost 1 billion people in India, so big country. Anyways, they read his family members on this leaf, so he was like astounded. And then they told him that he was destined, for enlightenment in this life, but it wasn't going to come through his teacher that he had now at that point. But this teacher would pass away, and then he would find a new teacher, and that teacher would lead him to the light, so to speak. And that's exactly what happened. Ramesh gave a lot of money to his first guru to build he had quite a bit of followers apparently, and to build like an ashram. And then he was always interested in Ramana Maharshi, so he would read The Mountain Path, which is the publication of Ramana Maharshi. And The Mountain Path, I love that magazine. It's been around since the 60s. And so Ramesh obviously had probably been reading that for quite some time. And he looked in there. This was probably in the 70s. He looked in The Mountain Path, and there was a quote from Nisargadatta Maharaj. And he's like, wow, who's this guy? This looks profound. And then sure enough, he comes to find out that this Nisargadatta Maharaj lived within a mile or two of his house, albeit a very downtrodden part of Mumbai, As I recall, Ramesh was in an area called Breach Candy, and it was along the ocean kind of, but still, compared to U.S. standards, I mean, poor people here, basically in the cities, live about equivalent to the high end in India, the elite. in the sense of cleanliness and infrastructure. Of course, our infrastructure here in the United States is amazing, but in India, it's a different way of living, and everybody has servants, So I would say Ramesh lived a pretty plush life, but he was a intelligent guy and a president of, I think it might be the biggest bank in India. So obviously the dude was well accomplished. And he even said as he was being elevated he started out as a bank teller. And he said he watched himself move up the ladder faster than other people who seemed just as qualified. And he felt like everything was predetermined. That was kind of his thing. He was kind of like, I feel like I'm watching a dream and I'm just watching it happen. So he was living this kind of like banker life at the same time, curious about the absolute. And so he would read about Ramana Maharshi. He loved Ramana. And then, as I said, in the mountain path, he stumbled on some Nisargadatta quotes. So he's like, I got to go see this guy. So this would have been the late 70s. Nisargadatta passed on in about 1981. And so we're talking late 70s here, 78, 79, which was the year I was born, 78. Ramesh goes and sits with Nisargadatta Maharaj. And he goes up to the flat, and Nisargadatta's there all alone. And I guess Ramesh got there a little early, and just so happened Nisargadatta was sitting there alone. And then Nisargadatta just sat there and looked at him, and his first words to him were, "Finally, you came." And he said, "Sit," and showed him where to sit or whatever. And so Ramesh started experiencing, I guess being in the presence of a great sage can, when you're ripe and ready, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So the presence of Nisargadatta had a profound influence on Ramesh, obviously. At that point, Ramesh had just, been reading, basically, and hadn't had the Purusha, or the aura of a great advanced being, which is often needed to kind of like, almost like you think about, how can I explain this? In your aura, there's bodies like Buddhic body, Christ body, that kind of stuff. Your bodies that only start buzzing or get activated in a high level of consciousness. Well, when you're around a teacher, it's like it primes them, it gets them ready. It's like it starts to activate them. And being that, life is one, thy soul and my soul are one, It's amazing to think, though, there's bodies within the bodies energetically. We probably understand very little about how that works, but we do know that being in the presence of a great teacher does affect you and change your destination, Some people believe that it's hard to, or almost impossible, to be enlightened without at least touching the presence of a great advanced being. And so that's why, there is the devotion to great teachers. And sometimes the devotion is amiss, as I talked about in previous podcasts, but, which can hurt you. But obviously, to be in the presence of a great teacher is one of the blessings of this life, Very wise to pray and ask God to guide you to a being that loves and cares and sees you as itself. So Ramesh, going every day, he's retired now. There was mandatory retirement when he was like in his mid to late 60s from the Bank of India. Basically, they just said, here's your pension. You have to retire. You've reached a certain age, plus the years you work for us combined equals this, which means mandatory retirement. So he's like, all righty then. And he just kind of used his time pursuing non-duality and spending time with Nisargadatta. Well, within a couple years, he went through some drastic changes. He started to translate for Nisargadatta as well, because Ramesh's English was quite good. Having so many dealings in business, etc., he needed great English. English is one of the 4 major languages of India. Hindi is probably the biggest. I believe Nisargadatta spoke Marathi. Tamil's a big one. There's a few others, but English is one of the main languages there. So there's plenty of English speakers, but to be quite fluent and good and be able to translate was something else. Ramesh had that ability, and so he would translate for Nisargadatta. And one day he found the translations happening before Nisargadatta even spoke. Like there was foreigners, Westerners, because they had gotten Maurice Friedman's book "I Am That," which was a translation of the teachings of Nisargadatta, obviously. Um, he found that the translations were coming out spontaneously, and that basically it was just happening. In the enlightened state is everything happens spontaneously. So everything happens spontaneously in that state. And at some point, even Nisargadatta affirmed that Ramesh was enlightened, and he said Nisargadatta was sweet. He said, you don't have to teach what I teach. You can, my lineage, because Nisargadatta actually came from a lineage. There were several teachers. Basically, they were family men who pursued enlightenment while living normal lives. But Ramesh had a little different bend. He had a bent to him that was a little more mind-oriented, I feel. Um, I must say right now that I very much was attracted to his teaching. In 2002, 2003, I stumbled on some of his works, and it had a huge impact on me. I remember in Seattle at a spiritual bookstore, it was life-changing, you know? Um, yeah. So Ramesh didn't go to like teach right away. It's not that he set up shop. He just, Nisargadatta had passed on, and Ramesh did write the book Pointers to Nisargadatta Maharaj, which he said just kind of flew out of him. I guess it was kind of cementing the teaching and understanding in him as he wrote it. And, he's a scholar, and it was in his nature to write books, so that's what he did. Um, so this would have been, I guess, in the later 80s, maybe mid 80s, a foreigner heard that he was a translator for Nisargadatta, and he was seeking for answers. And so he went and sat with Ramesh, and the guy was kind of, like, wow, this is kind of profound meeting with Ramesh. So he said, do you mind if I bring some friends back tomorrow? And Ramesh said, sure. How about 10 o'clock? So the guy brought back some friends, maybe his wife and a couple other seekers, and thus started these daily chats. And I think Ramesh met in the morning around 9 or 10 o'clock, and then at night around 7 o'clock, something like that. It's been some time, been about 14, 15 years since I've been there. Um, but he just held these informal meetings, and you walk up to the building, and there was like a doorman there, and the doorman was like, "Oh, okay, you're here for the meeting. Go up." So then you took like some stairs up to like the fourth or fifth floor, and you knock on the door, and there's probably a little note on the door that said Ramesh's flat. And then you walk in, and there's, other Westerners there, and some Indians as well. Somebody was always recording the chats. There's a few books for sale. I didn't know it, but there's these 3 hot seats that if you had questions, you sat in these seats. I sat in the first one. I was thinking, oh, this is a good seat. I'll sit right up front. Nobody's taking this. So the first thing, Ramesh kind of walks in and kind of bows to all of us. And then he said, what brings you here? Blah, blah, blah. Or, what do you have on your mind? And I said, I actually don't really have any questions. I kind of just came to chat. And he was very gracious. And, I didn't understand that these seats were for the questioners, the people that had questions. So he was just very gracious. He said, okay. And then he went to the next person, and life just carried on. I do remember leaving his flat the first time, that first visit, because I visited him in September of 2004, and then again in probably March 2005. Um, I remember walking out of the flat and feeling like everything was happening spontaneously. Like, there's probably some build up to see a teacher that you believe and know is enlightened. His work has had an effect on you, and now you're in India seeing this person live. It was a big deal to me. So it was pretty profound for me. I remember basically it was about 8 days, and then I traveled to Tamil Nadu. I wanted to go to, my whole reason for going there was to go to Ramana Maharshi's ashram, and that was beautiful, and I can share that experience at another time. Just at that point they'd been in existence for a long time, and so they had great traditions and a lot of visitors, but also the small town with Ramana's ashram. I never know how to say the name, so I'm gonna butcher. But Tiruvannamalai. Um, it's a welcoming town. They get a lot of visitors. There's this huge Shiva ashram. There's only like a few of them in India, and this was a major one. And also a lot of beautiful saints had lived there. For whatever reason, Arunachala Mountain had attracted people. So that is a worthy pilgrimage place for the seeker. It's fun, and I loved it. I loved eating at Ramana's ashram, and thinking about where he walked. And I did walk up to the caves that Ramana meditated in as a younger man. Anyways, eventually, um, I went back to Mumbai to spend a little more time with Ramesh. I'm like, well, I'm like, why am I not there more often? Like, what a unique opportunity, like what a benefit to my soul. Um, Apparently, some stuff had gone down between the time when I saw him and by the time he had gone and done some retreat. And apparently, word got out. And I don't mean to offend anybody that's devoted to Ramesh. I loved the guy. I loved his teaching. I loved what came through him. But this part's a little sad. Apparently, he was getting close with some followers, and getting massages from some of the women and that kind of stuff, and which wasn't uncommon, but I think it got taken a little too far. And I think what happened is he fell for he bit into the apple, of lust, and apparently some sweet little young Westerner came, and I met her. He had her living in one of the flats above his house, kind of secretively, and I don't know if his wife understood, but because Ramesh was married at the time. And again, I'm not bashing this guy. It is really sad to me that this happened, and but I want to be honest about it. I don't hear people talking about it, and I want to be honest about it. Again, I revere the teaching that came through him and his intelligence and compassion too, great compassion towards others. And then what can happen is this could be a long thing to delve into, but you know like it or not, teachers are attacked. Teachers are attacked on energetic levels, and especially if you're a guru, shedder of darkness, that that which is doesn't want to see the advancement of human consciousness will attack that. And that's why it's wise to trust in God, but tie up your camel. To always be aware that there's that in this life that would rather see you suffer and die. And if you think that's fantasy, then I feel sorry for you, because that's naive. Um, there's been Muhammad picked up the sword, and there's been fallen gurus throughout time, many, 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 many. And if you think that doesn't exist, then you're naive. This happened to Ramesh. My understanding is that a lot of us on the spiritual path aren't prepped. There's power over others. There's money. There's lust. And those are the major ones. The pride of the power. Lust, meaning it still has to do with power over others. You can get others to have sex with you, and because you have that kind of charm and power, people hold you up, to God status, basically, which in a certain context is true. There's a prusha, an aura of an enlightened being, which is grace, but there's still a human being there. So wise to not get into guruism, wise to respect and revere, the teachings and the person, but not to do this holier than thou thing, which I'd been guilty of in this life as a young man. I thought they're all going to be like Ramana, but it's not that way. Plus, especially in the West, we don't have the traditions of the great gurus. We don't understand it. But I remember I came back to see Ramesh after I left Ramana's place, and I went up there, and I was like, hey, can I come see you privately? He's like, kind of looks me up and down. He's like, sure. He goes, how about 3 o'clock today or 2 o'clock, something like that. And apparently Ramesh would pace up and down his apartment. And, it's kind of long, and he'd walk a circle and then come back down the hall, and walk a circle, come back down the hall, type of deal. And he'd walk a couple miles a day apparently. And I happened to come up during that time. And as soon as I got up to his door, I knock on it. And this young, sweet, I don't know if she was Canadian. I don't know where she was from for sure. I thought I remember Canadian. She could have been American, but I think she was Canadian. Answered the door, and there was just this moment of shock. It's so bizarre. Like, because I didn't have any context of who she was, but she looked at me and I looked at her, and there was this feeling of, what? Just this weird feeling when I saw her, and I had no idea he was, you know, uh, sleeping with this girl or whatever he was doing. Weird to talk about now, but there was this weird moment of like, where both our jaws dropped, like energetically, like, what are you doing type of situation. So she didn't even say anything to me. It was just an odd encounter. And I walked into Ramesh, and of all the damn things you could ask a teacher, the only thing I could say was, do you have any regrets? That's what I said to him. I've never told anybody this. What are the chances you go see what you consider to be a great guru? And at this point, keep in mind, I didn't know all this trouble went down at one of his, I think it's in Germany or something. They get like 100 or 200 people to pay money, and they go to Germany, and they have this satsang, and there's a lot of bowing and namaste, and he teaches and gives talks. And there was monkey business going on, and somebody brought it to the light and called him out. And so there's a lot of controversy going on. I'd been away from it, I had no idea this was going on. Anyways, so I said to him, do you have any regrets? And he was like, he was taken aback that I asked him that. And it seemed to kind of like frustrate him, And all he did was mutter his teaching, something along, if it's, something about how everything's kind of predetermined, and if it was meant to happen, it happened because it's the will of God, blah, 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 that type of thing. And in that particular context, I feel like that's a distortion of teaching, to say, oh, I cheated with a young girl because it was God's will. That's an area, and that, to me, that was enough to say that, wow, something's going on here, and I need to distance myself, Again, I'm speaking from my personal experience, and I respect anybody that follows, that. I'm not going to put you down for being a follower of Ramesh or whatever, but that was my experience, and I am sharing it, and I owe it to be honest to share my experience, and that's what I'm doing. So he just sat and looked out his window then, and he wouldn't even turn around and look at me. I sat there in silence for a minute or two, and then I just got up and left. So I was kind of like, I wasn't even for sure what just happened or what I even asked, and then I didn't know why. But I left his flat, and I just walked away. And oddly enough, I got some dental work done in India because it was really cheap. I got some mercury removed from my mouth that I got when I was a kid. And it was affordable there. I could do it for like 50, 75 bucks, get this stuff removed, and then they put in amalgam. And this dentist had been schooled in Germany with more like, high-end stuff, equipment, and so this and that. So for some reason, my dentistry appointments were always interrupting with the satsangs. And so I was just like, I guess it's destined that I don't really go back there. And I might have went back one more time and just said thank you. And because I'm going to tell you the truth, man, Ramesh had a big impact on me. But from then on out, I didn't read any book, or I would never turn to open a book past publication date like 2003, but I still do feel very blessed by his earlier works like Consciousness Speaks. The books from the late 80s and early 90s in particular are just profound, and he had a great understanding. And he was a fan of Wei Wu Wei, who was an Irish aristocrat who wrote about non-duality. And his teaching reflected that, it was very much on the mental level. But of course, there was bhajans in that, just like Nisargadatta had at his, which is more heart-oriented. So yeah, that was I was a young seeker at that time, and that was interesting. I was probably in my mid-20s, I guess. And that was an interesting time. And I felt like I was there to learn something, and regardless, it was educational. But I want to say, you know, man, yeah. You know what? I had two friends that went to that retreat that Ramesh did, and one of the friends talked the other into it, and understandably, like, what a cool opportunity to be with the sage. I would have went too. I didn't even know about it. Um, I just want to say, like, you feel as a seeker, you're opening up your aura, your mind, and your soul to a teacher. That's what happens. You trust. That's what Christians are doing to Jesus Christ. That's what Buddhists are doing with the words of Buddha. You know, you have inherent faith, implicit faith that this is the truth. Because we all need that. We need something to devote our lives to. We need a truth, especially if we're driven to want to know truth. You know, if we want to escape Mara, or live sattvic lives of love. You know, we open up our hearts and our minds. So it messes with your mind a little bit, you know. And I was able to. My experience was, I was okay. I understood what had happened. I adored the teachings that came through Ramesh, and I was okay with it. And again, there's going to be people out there that say he never fell, blah, blah, blah. People made that stuff up, blah, blah, blah. But I had friends that were there and witnessed it, you know, and it's not good. And, people can fall. It's just the way it is. Does it taint the earlier teachings that came through him? He was enlightened, man. There's no doubt about it. This is just my view, of course. This is my view. But I feel he was enlightened, and Nisargadatta put a stamp on him, and you know, enlightened being, no matter where they come from in the world or what tradition, it's a blessing, because they're seeing they're speaking from a place beyond the mind. They're speaking from a vibration that blesses and stills your mind, and advances your soul, towards perfection, or towards beauty, towards oneness, towards love. And that really is the point of existence, is it not? Um, so you can feel spiritually like raped. I'm sure there's people that feel hurt because when a teacher's integrity is put in question, now it's like, oh my God, what did I just devote my life to? So very painful. But that being said, there are temptations out there, and teachers, Jesus Christ went through temptations in the desert. I'll give you power over everything, the satanic or luciferic energy, I should say, not satanic. Satanic's more like ripping up bodies and like crazy, like destruction. That's like satanic. Luciferic energy is more like distortion of truth. So Jesus faced the big luciferic temptations that any great teacher would. You transcend the negativity of this world, you're going to be faced with its opposite. So here's Jesus Christ sitting up on the Mount of Olives or whatever he was on, and sounded right, Mount of Olives, I don't know. And the Luciferic temptation is, throw yourself down before me and I'll give you this world. Like, you can dominate this world and own it. And Jesus Christ said, all power comes from the Father. He basically saw the error of the reasoning of the Luciferic temptation. So not all teachers are prepped. Not all teachers are prepared. Maybe Nisargadatta didn't say, you're going to be faced with temptation. But I wanted to read a little bit from Ramesh's book called Consciousness Speaks. I'll just start midway through this page here. These words exist because there is consciousness. That is very clear. If you were not conscious, none of this would be happening. Questioner says, that is also just words. When you say, that is consciousness, these are just words. Ramesh, yes, any problem that you have, any questions that arise, words are still just words, aren't they? Questioner, you see, I buy the whole thing, but it just keeps coming up all the time. Ramesh, yes, you buy the whole thing. You buy the whole illusion, but you don't put yourself as part of that illusion. And that is where the ultimate trouble arises. You accept that everything is an illusion, everything is a dream, but you consider yourself as separate from that dream or illusion. Therefore, the problem. Questioner, because I don't find it real. I understand it, but I don't find it real. Ramesh, you don't find it real? How can you find an illusion as real? You accept that it is an illusion. Questioner, Ramesh, so if you accept it as an illusion, how can you find something real? Questioner, because that is an illusion, right? Yes. Right, it can't be real. Ramesh, it can't be real. And if everything is an illusion, then you and I, the listener and the speaker, are both part of that illusion. We are both part of that illusion. This event that is happening is still part of that illusion. Questioner, how do I find the reality in it? Ramesh, who has to find the reality? Who is it? Questioner, me. Ramesh, and the me is an illusion, you see. If me is an illusion, how can the me find anything? How can the me seek anything? Questioner, but there has to be truth somewhere. Ramesh, no. Questioner, no? Ramesh, no. Truth or reality is itself a concept. When you are in the truth or in deep sleep, which is only a pale reflection of the real, in that state of deep sleep is the truth. And in that truth, there is no experience. In the waking state, the state of deep sleep is a concept. In deep sleep, it is the truth. But the moment you think of reality, the moment you think of subject, the moment you think of the absolute, the moment you think of truth, it is a concept. It is only when the thinking totally stops that truth exists. You are conscious. You are in the waking state. Now there is a sense of presence. The sense of presence is present. When you are in deep sleep, there is an absence of the sense of presence. In the waking state, there is the presence of the sense of presence. In deep sleep, there is an absence of the sense of presence. But this absence and presence are both in the state of illusion and phenomenality. So if you can imagine a state in which there are no opposites, that state is the absence, not only of the presence of the sense of presence, but also absence of the sense of presence. In other words, the whole concept of presence and absence is not there. When we talk of time and space, we say infinite space and eternal time. It is still a mental concept of total space and total time, but the mind cannot conceive of that state prior to the arising of the space-time. The moment you think of reality, the reality is a concept. You are the reality of which the split mind makes a concept. You are the reality, but not as the me. So there was a little smattering of from Ramesh book. You can tell there's, he's pretty intense with the wording. He speaks of nominality and phenomenality. Nominality meaning the whole context, phenomenality meaning the content, and how, the phenomenal is part of the nominal. But enlightenment is knowing yourself as the nominant, the nominality, the big picture, the context, all that is, nothing and yet everything. So, the biggest paradox of existence is truth, is it not? If it wasn't a paradox, if it was easy to understand, there'd be a lot of enlightened people, but there aren't. There's a little construction going on next door, so I want to say sorry for the background noise there. But, I do like what Ramesh is saying. It does stop my mind, and I often feel grace in those words. And again, I can see the truth in his words and not be devoted to a teacher that fell. I consider, and again, this is my experience, my opinion. It's tragic to me in the sense of, in the eyes of truth and love, and the relief of suffering of all beings, which ultimately seeking enlightenment is about the relief of suffering. If you are all beings, then we want the relief of suffering of all beings as our intention. May all beings be blessed. Even if all beings are an illusion, when they suffer, they don't feel like they're an illusion. So we shouldn't confuse levels of truth. So it's sad to me. I look up at my wall and I see, my Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta and Dr. David Hawkins, some of my teachers. And in my view, they never strayed from truth. They never fell for money or power over others or sex, that type of stuff, which a lot of teachers have fallen in. And like Billy Graham, the great Christian prophet, he never fell for those things, and he was very careful and aware that those existed. And I feel that was wise to take that stance and not act like they're not real and don't exist. You don't need 30 Rolls Royces to be a spiritual teacher, thankfully. But, God bless you, Ramesh. God bless your spirit. And thank you for the gifts that, you bestowed through your teacher and Guru Nisargadatta Maharaj, who I'm extremely grateful for as well. And with that, that's my story. And that's, a little tidbit of Ramesh and his life. So I wish you all peace. And I wish you all understanding and love. May God bless you. Bye-bye.
Wherever I go, please go there with me. Whatever I think, let my thoughts be of thee. I am just a pilgrim. I live in a fantasy, letting go of control. I am remembering. Wherever I go, please go there with me. Whatever I think, let my thoughts be of thee. I am just a pilgrim. I live in a fantasy, letting go of control. I am remembering. Well, if I stop, look around, what do I choose to see? Do I look through the filter of the past, mistakenly? Or do I look through the eyes that embrace the truth of me? I'm asking you now, Lord, please help me see. Wherever I go, please go there with me. Whatever I think, let my thoughts be of thee. I am just a pilgrim. I live in a fantasy, letting go of control. I am remembering. As I look out, eternity looks right back into my eyes. Will I submit to the smallness of my mind, or open up as the sky? Will I lean on God, the one who knows all my inner workings? I'm asking thee, oh Lord, please help me see. Wherever I go, please go there with me. Whatever thoughts be of thee. I am just a pilgrim, I live in a fantasy, letting go of control.